let's start with the idea then of the body as a compass. Now,
Mm.
I'm aware that you write and speak about this extensively. It's been a huge part of your work. And it makes me wonder, first, how many people are out there that haven't yet developed this skill set of listening to their body? And then, second, how many people do you think actually want to hear what their body is saying? What are your thoughts here?
Good question. I notice, because for me, this is quite a natural phenomenon. I haven't had to do a huge amount of work. It hasn't been effortful for me to tune into my body as a compass. And I mean that literally. Like my body pulls me, it pulls my arms and legs, it pulls my voice. And it's like, I know what needs to be said. I know where I need to go. I know the relationships I need to nurture. I know the relationships I need to let go. Like it's a very physical compass. And I'm listening, I'm attuning. I have incredible reverence for the somatic intelligence of my body. And so that relationship between my awareness, my consciousness, and my bodily sensations, my bodily signals is very fine tuned. It's a huge amount of sacred respect. And in some ways, it feels like that was my little ticket, my little gift that I was born with. And so it's naturally become what I teach and how I live. And so the challenges for me have been what you're kind of pointing to here is that a lot of people are intimidated by their body signals. Will have a natural reflex or habit of suppressing, denying, ignoring, distracting, diminishing, abnormalizing, pathologizing, othering. So they're actually distancing themselves from their own personal experience and their own inner world. And from my perspective, that's kind of baffling because I've been having this gift really from very, very, very young, potentially from birth. So there is a bit of a chasm and a bridge that is my life work. It's like, how do I gently, kindly, softly, warmly open up this conversation that actually your body is intelligent. Your body knows what it's doing. Your body is on your team and your body is calling you home. And there is nothing to be afraid of. And that's the big crux of my work, that even when it gets gnarly and intense and there's high arousal and there's like a really scary mental landscape with thoughts and fears and worries, even when the emotions are wild, and even when at that spiritual plane we're hovering about who do I trust? Do I believe the external authorities or do I turn my gaze lovingly inwards and begin to heed my own inner wisdom? That's the spiritual piece. Am I looking within for authority, inner authority, self leadership? Or am I saying, no, I give up, it's too much, I can't, and I'm going to go outside and get that external authority? So it doesn't really matter how challenging these parts of the journey become, how deep the physical pain is. We can always breathe and stay present with it. And once people begin to learn that it's a passing experience, and because we understand the cycles, just like summer, autumn, winter, spring, or the moon, new moon, waxing moon, full moon, waning moon, dark moon, those big experiences rise and fall. And so once we learn to trust the cycles and trust our own capacity to stay present through the bigger experiences, we begin to really build that muscle of self-trust. And that process occurs in a titrated way. So it's gentle. It's not like you go from no self-trust to blissing out in a panic attack. We build up our capacity for discomfort and challenge. But the last thing I'll say is I notice a lot of health professionals or somatic workers talk about the body, and they're very locked in that physical plane. And I think to really understand the body, I call it a somatic spiritual journey, a somatic spiritual apprenticeship, because we're learning by feeling. Um, we have to be able to drop into the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, relational aspects,
Yep.
because my body is actually responding to the environment it's living in. So I'm getting information about you, Kai, by being in relationship with you, and my body's giving me that information. And vice versa. So it's about this reciprocity of understanding how to read the signals of the body and understand, well, what's mine to work with and what's Kai's. And having this beautiful boundary of knowing this is where I end and this is where Kai begins. And that's actually like a psychic boundary. It's an invisible boundary. And then we're swapping information between us. And we can have a really healthy relationship when we understand what's mine, what's yours, and what's ours. What do we share? There's no merging or messiness. So this is all coming through the body compass, through feeling, through the inside out lens.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of good juice in there. So I would love to hear you put language to this idea. It's not just an idea, but it's a very real experience that there is a cost to numbing oneself to what's happening in the body. I mean, as you spoke to, people are disconnected from their bodies for a variety of reasons, just from an overarching point of view: anxiety, pain, fear, traumatic experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I seen you write, maybe it was in the manuscript that you
Mm-hmm.
passed on to me or somewhere else, that part of embodiment is being brave enough to feel reality, what's happening in the body exactly as it is, flowing
Yep.
through your body.
Yep.
And this disconnection that you're speaking to, it often begins as a protective strategy from all these things that have
Yeah.
happened in our past experience, all the things that we don't want to feel. And, not everyone takes it upon themselves to be courageous enough to go beyond this self-imposed threshold and to feel what's happening in their body. And I don't know how many people know that there is a cost to this, to numbing oneself.
Yeah. So I work with sensory distortions, and I'm largely known for vertigo and tinnitus, which are both
Mhm.
inner ear conditions that the medical world doesn't really know what to do with. So they'll often send people away, say, go and live with it, give them generic physiotherapy exercises or medicate them for anxiety and depression, etc. So it's a bit of a pickle for the medical world. They're a little stuck. And so when they come to me, we look at that holistic picture of what is your body telling you? Why is this sound signal or imbalance signal, this dizziness signal, why is it repeating? Because that's the cost, right? It's very debilitating to feel that you're constantly being pushed, pulled, or spinning. I mean, it's hard to go to the supermarket. It's hard to enjoy your children. It's incredibly debilitating, and these are invisible disabilities. And with tinnitus sounds in the ears, it can be hard to just have a conversation. It's so distracting. So the cost is huge. And
Mhm.
if we scale it back a bit, the body expresses quote unquote symptoms, because symptoms are actually body signals, they're body sensations. And if you take the perspective that the body has somatic intelligence and it's actively getting our attention by generating body signals, right? So if my body wants me to know I'm hungry, it gives me hunger signals. If my body wants me to know that I need to go to the toilet, I receive toilet signals, right? So we're all tuned into this at some level.
Mhm.
So these chronic symptoms, whether it's chronic pain, chronic tinnitus, sounds in the body or the ears, chronic dizziness, these kind of things, persistent body sensations, it's when the body's saying, I have life experiences that have not been digested. They have not been metabolized and they have not moved through me. They're stuck and they're accumulating. And from a neural pathway point of view, you can think of it as like a traffic jam. So we've got this vital energy and life force, of which our Eastern traditions have so many beautiful different words and Indigenous Australian languages. So prana, chi, and so on.
Mhm.
We have this incredible life force moving through the body, and if that can't flow, it gets stuck. And it's in those pain points that we need to bring our loving attention. And this is what my Sensing Ground book that you referred to earlier gives you the roadmap of how do we reconnect back into whole body sensory awareness. So the cost of not listening to the body is those body signals amplify. They get louder to get our attention. Pain is the loudest language the body has. And when the body is just like giving us little subtle information, they're little whispers, you know, the little tingles. It's the body shivers, and they're like subtle signals. But when the body really wants our attention and says, hey, you got to tune into this, don't ignore me, it will bring up really large, annoying, uncomfortable, quote unquote, pain signals.
Mm.
So once we listen to those, tune in and understand what the body needs from us, how do we respond to the body? How do I care for the body? So that the body can turn off that signal because the message has gotten through.
Mm.
And a great little example is anger. You know, anger is such a powerful emotion, and often anger will come with sensations of contraction and heaviness and furrowing of the brows and maybe faster thoughts or a louder voice, you know. Anger has a lot of energy and a lot of life force. And if we suppress that, we're really, really stopping the rivers flowing of our health. It's damming them up and blocking them.
Mhm.
But what anger is often asking of us is saying, hang on, somewhere in your life, your boundaries are being violated. And this is not okay with me. I am a sacred being and my needs matter. I matter. And so, where in my life are my boundaries being violated? Now, that could be in your family home, it could be in the workplace, it could be in the community, and it could be you're living with very real injustices and isms, racism, sexism, any form of minority, you know. But it can also be I'm violating my own boundaries. And that's always a good
Mhm.
place to start. Where in my life am I pushing myself or forcing myself to do things, say things, or go places or be with people where it's actually not nourishing me? But I'm pushing through all of those signals that are saying, I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this. This doesn't match my ethics. Right? So it's really about slowing down and starting with that self relationship. In what ways am I violating my own boundaries and letting other people walk all over me? So the signals and the messages often follow patterns, and you'll get the pattern recognition.
Mhm.
And so rather than it being a purely physical experience of dealing with just a shoulder ache or a back pain and seeing a massage therapist, this process of living with the body as a compass becomes more of a whole body experience. And we're looking into not just the physical sensations, but also what are the emotions attached to it? What are the thoughts and beliefs attached to it?
Mm.
And from that spiritual perspective of what's my dharma here? What's my personal life lesson here? What's my role to play here? Do I need to speak up? What patterns do I need to change and shift? Because that fundamentally changes how we live our life and how we relate to ourselves and others. And then your symptoms, poof,
Mm.
dissolve.
Mhm.
Oh.
Yep, I know this firsthand on my own journey. And this self trust, the inner authority, the reclamation of one's personal power, this is such a huge thread in both of the work that we have to offer our people. And as you say, the
Mm.
body holds stories, signals, wisdom, all kinds of messages, and learning to read and listen to the body forms part of this foundation of
Yep.
developing the self trust, the inner authority, one's capacity for internal navigation. So, to keep laying the foundation, it might be nice to hear you speak about warm data versus cold data. I don't
Mhm.
know if this is something that you've come up with or if it's a framework that someone else has put language to, but I'd never heard it phrased this way until I came across what you had written.
Um, I think I started using this before I encountered Nora Bateson's work, but Nora Bateson has an entire kind of schooling that she calls warm data.
Uh-huh.
And so Nora's fabulous for looking at really, really big picture, complex problems on our planet, complex science. She's an interesting person to follow. But Nora defines warm data as the relational and contextual information that comes through the observer's experience. So it's the inside out lens.
Hmm.
And the cold data is what we get when we go to the doctors. Or if you get an external auditor to come in and audit your business, that's cold data. It's coming from the outside in lens. It's and it's often quantifiable, it's seen, it's known, it's very rigorously scientific. The warm data is when we sort of say things like, I know all of the numbers are adding up, but something feels off.
Mm.
And so when we're living, I think, with true wisdom, we're using both cold data and warm data in
Mm.
equal proportions,
Mm.
because both lenses hold value. I would always preference my inside lens.
Mm.
And the reason for that is because, as a scientist myself who collects fancy data through my vestibular audiology background,
Mhm.
the data in and of itself can be subjective and can change from day to day. If you think about measuring biological data, blood test or whatever from a woman, you get different results based on where she is in a menstrual cycle.
Mm.
So I think it's very important to understand the limitations of that cold data. It's taking a snapshot in time of a very complex and dynamic system,
Mhm.
which is human life. It's trying to get a snapshot. And so you really have to use cold data. So for my clients, it would be hearing test results and vestibular testing results and blood test results and MRI scan results. It's a snapshot. It is not a complete picture.
Yep. The static analysis, the metrics, all that type of stuff.
Yes, and the warm data would be, well, what do you actually feel in this moment here and now? And
Mhm.
how are you going to support that feeling here and now? Because that is life. You can have all those numbers over there, but that doesn't change how you experience your body. So the warm data questions are vital and central to understanding the body as a compass.
Mhm.
How am I feeling in myself? And I invite my clients to use all 8 senses: taste, touch, smell, sound, sight, vestibular, which is movement and balance,
Mm.
proprioception, which is orientation and location, so
Mhm.
knowing where I am in space and time, and
Mhm.
interoception is the 8th sense, which is not only your emotions, but those body cues of hunger, thirst, sexuality, all of those internal body cues. So
Mm.
using all of your 8 senses mindfully, consciously, lovingly, then you're more likely to arrive at intuition and insight.
Yeah, and I will double click on that as well because so often it's talked about our our inner landscape is or our experience state is talked about in terms of these 5 senses, and I love that you expanded out to include those other 3 senses, the vestibular, proprioception, and the interoception. Can you unpack that a little bit more? Because you just kind of skimmed over it there. For like everyone's familiar with the 5 basic senses. And
Yep.
I'll also preface it by saying that, yeah, it makes sense why there's so many people who don't go on this journey of developing self trust, cultivating inner authority, who hyperfixate or give so much power to the cold data, which is this externalization of authority, listening to other people about how things are and what they're meant to be and how we're supposed to be feeling and all the rest of
Yeah.
it. And developing a sensitivity and an intimacy with these 8 senses of our body, it's
Mhm.
crucial. It's
Yeah.
such an important aspect of
Yeah.
this self-trust, inner authority, personal power, all the stuff that we're talking about. So, yeah, for those that aren't familiar, it'd be great to have you unpack that just a little bit more.
Yeah. And first of all, I also feel like, from a rite of passage and shamanic point of view, part of our journey as humans is exhausting the cold data. It's
Mm.
like you need to ask your parents, ask your teachers, ask your doctors, you know, call Governor General, ask. And then you get to a point where you're like, no one's got my answers.
Mhm.
Damn. And then you get that motivation and that spark that goes, I have nowhere left to look except in here.
I know that
And
well.
it's that tipping point that's really that spiritual junction
Mm.
of saying, you know what, I've given it a really good crack of seeing 20 doctors. I've spoken to everyone. Everyone's kind of disappointing me. No one's getting it. I'm so stuck. Am I ready to get curious and to consider, maybe I'm the leader in this expedition? Maybe self leadership and self responsibility. God, I tried to not, I've tried everything, and that's all normal. And so some people will get to that place at age 14, right? And in some traditional cultures, 14 and 15-year-old were sent out on walkabout to find their spirit guides, to find their highest self, and they had to survive in harsh conditions for multiple days and come back reborn as a young adult who now had access to self-authority. And then, the next 10 or so years of their life, they would be building that relationship to their self-authority with adult mentors who kept pointing them back toward themselves. Whereas we live in a culture where we're perpetually in adolescence, we're always deferring ourselves to external authority. Just look at the way women are birthing. They're not taught to trust their body and to trust their rhythms and trust their inner authority. They are taught to be afraid of their birth and to ask external authorities to make those choices for them. So this is cultural. So I just wanted to really second what Kai said there. I'm quite unusual, which is why I called it a gift. I was born with this radical sovereignty. Probably wasn't easy for my parents, let's face it. So redirect me back. I felt like it was important to give context.
Yeah, no, that is important. And there's another thread that we can pull on there that I am curious as to how many people actually fear their own authority, because it sounds like a great thing. Why would we not want to reclaim our own inner authority?
Oh, I can tell you why. We're
There's a
afraid
lot
of
of
power.
responsibility in that.
Yes, we're afraid of our own power, and we're afraid of the responsibility that comes with that power. So it's like, I didn't really want to host online communities and go against the medical institutions. It's not really going against, but it's standing alone. I left the medical mainstream way of treating these clients because it was making me sick. My compass was saying, no, Joey, you cannot subscribe to this. We can offer more holistic care. And it's like once I could see what was possible, I couldn't continue being blind. And so I had to stand alone. It was scary, I had to create my own methodologies. I had to stand alone and become a lone voice amongst the noise. And so many courageous and scary steps to living my soul truth. And that vertigo and tinnitus rock steady journey then took me into people were learning how to rebuild new sensory pathways and reconnect to their senses, their 8 senses, with loving attention and reverence instead of abnormalizing what they feel or being afraid of what they feel. They're learning to be curious, kind, and receptive to their body signals. And my clients with vertigo and tinnitus would say, everybody needs this. My auntie, my uncle, my cousin, they don't have vertigo or tinnitus, but they need these skills. And that's where Sensing Ground sort of became the next book and the next program that got pulled out of me. My body compass said, you need to share this information with more people. And so I had to do all this nervous system work, which circles back to your earlier point of why are we scared? We need to build our window of tolerance, which is a nervous system concept that if we haven't had a loving, securely attached adult to guide us through big experiences through our infancy and preschooler years and childhood, it means that we only really know how to disconnect from our body because we haven't had an adult holding us, cuddling us, activating proprioception input through the cuddle. That's the touch and the locating and saying, yeah, breathe through this. It's okay. Cry, kick, scream. You feel scared. Yes. You feel confused. Yes. I'm here with you. Let's feel it. So that's an adult role modeling. Stay with your body. You've got this big neurological experience. You've got high synchrony firing neurons in your emotional field and in your muscular body. You're feeling big things. Stay with it. A lot of us don't get that training from childhood. So we arrive at adulthood. We've coped by fighting, flighting, fawning, and freezing. So we have big experiences, big body signals, big body sensations, big emotions, and we either fight ourselves and say, no, I shouldn't feel this. Why do I feel this? Take a pill, see a doctor, right? Or we flight, we, open the fridge, we get a drink, we call a friend, we distract, we go to a party, we play another game of tennis, we avoid, right? Any type of distraction is the flight response. The freeze response is when we're actually so disconnected to ourselves, we don't know what we feel. So if someone in that moment was to say, "Hey, Kai, what do you feel like doing?" Or what do you feel like? You'd be like, "What do you feel like?" You actually can't answer the question because
Mhm.
there is a freeze state. That information about your sensory body has been cut off.
Mm.
And so freeze naturally leads to fawn. If I don't know what I want and what I desire, I
Mhm.
can't ask to get my needs met. So
Mhm.
my coping mechanism is to say, well, I can see you need a meal, so I'll cook for you. And then while I'm at it, I'll just eat with you. I don't even know I'm hungry because I'm in a freeze state and I'm fawning
Mhm.
to play along, to make it look like I'm cool and calm. So some people are really, really stuck in this freeze state where any type of body feeling is seen as a threat. So it's all reversible. That's the good news. And part of it is this titration, this gentle pacing of slowly bringing back in smell. Start with your favorite essential oils.
Mhm.
Slowly bring back in taste. Eat a ripe fresh tomato or, play with a leaf of basil in your hand and feel it, smell it, taste it, and really allow your senses to come back to life. And you do that with all of your senses, with body scanning and closing your eyes. You learn to orient, like, where are my shoulders? Where are my elbows? If I
Mhm.
close my eyes and I no longer rely on visual input, where are my lungs? Where is my breath? Where is my pelvis? Where is my womb? Where are my feet? And locating ourselves is so important for centering ourselves and for
Mhm.
knowing where we are on the planet, in the room, and in ourselves. So, this location piece is so important.
Mhm.
These big experiences. How can I locate myself when I'm in a storm?
Mhm.
So these are all skills that we learn. And as you build up this skill set of placing loving attention on your body, allowing more of your 8 senses to come back online and unfreeze,
Mm.
and less fight flight tendencies. Fawn tendencies are when you try and please someone, which classically happens in therapy rooms, where the client tries to please the therapist and do what they think the therapist wants of them,
Mhm.
right? So we're learning to identify and overcome this constant flow of fight, flight, freeze, fawn, so that we can actually be very present with whatever it is we're feeling. And we enter a whole body awareness. And that, using yoga language, is what brings us into this cosmic intelligence because we're not rejecting information anymore. We're living in full flow. The warm data is completely online. I know exactly where I am, who I am, and what I need to do in that moment to be of service, to
Mhm.
meet the moment and to meet reality with grace. And there's a real freedom and sense of eternal presence that comes because it's an experiential state. I'm not going anywhere. I've arrived and I have everything I need. All of the information is in free flow. And I actually refer to those states as orgasmic states. They're
Mm.
waves of sensory experience that never end.
Mm.
So the channels are open, the awareness is connected, and that window of tolerance has been kind of robustly built
Mhm.
so that whatever's arising, that knee jerk reaction or habit response is, yeah, I can feel that.
Mm.
It's a big experience, but yeah, I'm willing to feel it. Bring it on. Hello, welcome. What am I learning? So we shift from living in a what I would consider a no state, like, no, I don't want to feel it. Give me a chocolate bar, to, yeah, I am willing to feel this.
Mm.
And I would say with maturity and practice, which we're talking more about years now,
Mhm.
it actually becomes exciting because life becomes a shamanic journey. Every single moment is loaded with gifts of what we're learning, what we're experiencing, what we're sensing. Um, so it's that inner world, right? My 8 senses and intuition is my inner world.
Mhm.
It's fully on board and participating in my outer world experience. It's like this dual experience of inner and outer,
Mm.
which is a very, very satisfying, rewarding, full human experience. Nothing's cut off.
Mm. There's a lot of good stuff in there, and you answered some of the questions that I was going to offer you, one of which had to do around, well, circling back around to those extra three senses that you touched on multiple times there, but this sensory hierarchy or perhaps cultural bias that we might have of how we orient ourselves most in daily life, which some might say is through vision, through sight, and then through hearing. I mean, yeah, of course, we're still, when we're eating food, we're using taste, we're still smelling things, we're still feeling things. But some might say that we primarily hyperfixate on those two senses. And then expanding our awareness to these lesser acknowledged senses, the vestibular, the proprioception, and the interoception, can help us deepen into this sense of inner authority.
Mm.
And then what I'm also thinking about here, I don't know if you want to say anything more about that, but I'm thinking about the difference between feeling and then analyzing
Uh-huh.
bodily signals, because I think there can be a confusion in that, like the interpretation and how that might interfere with simply listening to the body's wisdom without analyzing it, but then this intersection of purely feeling and listening to what's
Mm.
happening within our bodies, and
Yep.
then building a vocabulary for felt sense experience.
Mm. I'm still have a cough. I can feel it right in the throat.
Yeah.
Good question. And I think this is where some of it, the translation can become lost or murky. So I'm going to start with your first point, which should feed us into the second point. And the first point is people do have senses that they will prioritize, whether it be their vision or their sound or some of the somatosensory touch. And we can call that a strength, right? And what we want to do is to keep adding on until you've got really good command and connection to all 8 senses. And practices like yoga are likely to make you have a more robust proprioception and vestibular connection, particularly Iyengar yoga, which is the yoga I started with at age 15. Um, but that's kind of not the point, actually. The point I want to circle back to is it's about preferencing. When you're really entering these journeys with my mantra of, yeah, I'm willing to feel this. Yes, and welcome. Yes, and welcome to this too. You could be smelling vomit and you don't turn away and go, ugh, I reject you. You go, okay, there's vomit there. Am I going to clean it up? There's non-reactivity. And you're willing to let in those dirty, messy, difficult experiences with that quality of yes and welcome. So we actually mature beyond preferencing bias and judgment. I'm not sort of saying, well, I like these essential oils and that's it. So I'll hook onto those and I need that. If I don't get that, I'm going to be really upset.
Sure.
Right? We're actually learning to expand our 8 senses to experience that full human spectrum of experience without the value loaded judgments. And a little example of that is I've just gone through, my family had COVID, and every time I experience COVID in my system, I learn more about love. I've got a really respectful relationship with COVID in that it keeps on deepening my sense of what it is to love. And it deepens my self-trust as well, this dance with this virus. So they've been very positive experiences, even though they've slowed me down. It's a lot of reading books on the couch, a lot of beautiful slow time with my children and my family. I've been able to really take all the wisdom home from that experience. Not a hint of resistance. So this idea of maturing beyond preferences is huge, and that can take people a while to learn, which feeds us into, are we feeling or are we analyzing? When you're analyzing, you're actually stepping into judgment, bias, and preference. When we're simply experiencing it, we're experiencing it as it is. So your senses are all neurons firing through your body, head to toe, and some part of your beautiful brain, the insula, is helping you make sense of and experience that visceral inner feeling. And the more you practice body scanning, which is the central skill I teach,
Mhm.
the more you build that capacity for the insula to make sense of your experience. It's
Mm.
not analyzing, it's sense making. And I think of it as if you have a beautiful light amount of summer rain and you walk out with your hands, palms gently facing up, fingers curled, and you just see what raindrops land in your hands. You receive the rain. You don't run around chasing it, measuring it, comparing it, right? You just simply receive the raindrops. That's
Mm.
what body scanning teaches you. Receive the sensory signals, receive them, feel them, and allow them to massage you. Allow them to inform you because it's through that conscious connection to sensation that I believe we meet God. We meet the sacred. It takes us right in. It's very penetrative. And we have an opportunity, if we're open to it, to really reach these mystical states.
Mm.
Moving beyond the analysis is a huge journey for most people. Some people get it quickly and other people take decades. But the key words here are experiencing. Another great example is standing under the shower and feeling the water fall over you, right? You're not analyzing the temperature. Like you're not thinking about your body shape or how beautiful you are. There's no judgment, there's no analysis. It's the experience of receiving the water and allowing it to fall over you. Whether it's hot water, cold water,
Mhm.
warm water, a trickle of water, a flood of water, you're simply experiencing the shower
Mhm.
as it is. And so that skill set of experiencing is part of deepening into those intuitive insight layers because they come a little bit after the experience. And I would say the judgment and analysis and the preferencing
Mhm.
interferes with that intuitive process.
Mhm.
So, when is it cognitive intelligence? Because we've been taught to think that way. So an example of that, when am I just eating vegetarian food because I took on that story somewhere in my life that eating vegetarian food was better and morally superior and the right thing to do? So it's cognitive learning from an external authority, but it's somatic intelligence when at some very deep level you know your body is nourished by a vegetarian diet.
Mm.
And it's a felt inner knowing. And it feels nourishing. So maybe I could add with this is in a cognitive level, I do really enjoy vegetarian food, um, deeply, but there are times when my body really, really, really needs to eat meat
Mhm.
because of my constitution,
Mhm.
and I can feel the difference because if there's a vegetarian meal on offer, my body will contract and go, "Ooh," right? Even though my mind likes it, my physical body will contract inward. But then if there's a hearty, ethically sourced meat meal available, my body will say, "Oh, yeah, yeah." It
Mhm.
opens, it lifts, there's a somatic response, and that's the physical compass. So the physical compass overrides that cognitive rule book.
Mhm. Yeah, the shower example is so relatable for so many people because in this hyper doing culture that we live in, I think for a lot of people, the shower is one of those few places where they really allow themselves to relax and be with and in the body. And then also to circle back around to my initial question, what have you got to say around building vocabulary for felt sense experience and the difference between analyzing and judging and then also developing healthy language to be able to express what it is that's going on in our internal world?
Yeah, definitely less is more. Excuse me. um, I know there's a quality of my intuitive voice that is slow, holds that heavy weight of wisdom. It's not loud, it's not banter, it's not aggressive. And it's very, very simple language. And the way I practice this with my rocksteady and sensing ground clients is as they go into their body scan experience. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with what I mean there, it's literally noticing head to toe, whole body,
Mm.
all of your sensations. And so when people are learning, it's often like yoga nidra, where it'd be, feel your hair falling around your face, feel your clothing, feel the furniture, wiggle your toes, right? That's the entry level in the portal, the touch. But really, we want to access inner vision. We want to access inner conversations and inner sound. We want to go right in and access all of those 8 senses. And so when my clients are body scanning, I'll say, which part of your body is speaking to you? Locate that. And they might say, okay, my chest. And then I'll say, take a moment to breathe there. Feel what color best represents that feeling. They might say red fire. And I'll say, what texture best represents that feeling? If you're an artist, describe it to me so I can share this with you, this experience. And they might say, it feels like lava, an exploding volcano. Right? I say, okay, let's breathe it together. The red, fire, lava, volcano, chest. Be with it fully. Loving attention, curious. So we're slowing it down, and you'll notice the words are more like a grade 2 art teacher. Simple. And when you use color and texture and these creative art-based words, like you're describing a museum piece, there's not actually judgment there. It almost strips it back. Because it could be gray and rocky, it could be yellow and sunshiny, it could be like a hot air balloon. These are metaphors. We're entering the mythic, we're entering the poetry. And the key here is it's not better, it's not worse, it's not a good day, it's not a bad day, right? There's no judgment. And so that's my role when I'm witnessing people and sharing the journey, is to keep them in that artistic, creative place of curiosity. And also being mindful not to put my words and my language onto them. And if and when I offer that, it's with consent, because language really shapes the inner experience. So we have to be really mindful about noticing what language our body holds and what stories our body holds. And if it doesn't feel nourishing and expansive, that we have to have strategies for eliminating those stories, emptying them, and rewriting the truer stories that actually match our physical body, that fit well in our compass. The body will reject statements that don't belong to it, and it will soak up and marinate in statements that do belong. Classic ones being, I'm enough. Generally, that sits well, because I would say that's fairly true universally. And the I'm not enough statement, right? The body's going to reject that most likely. And the other ones are I can statements tend to be nourishing. Vitality flows. The spine lifts up. The chest opens. The breath eases. The I can't statements, all the energy drops. It sinks. It contracts. There's a belittling. So linking in the body scan physical experience with both the artistry of it. What does it taste like? What does it smell like? Color, texture. And then also those core belief statements that hook onto body sensations. This is where it takes us on, it can become quite a shamanic journey when you go deeply into yourself and you start meeting these core beliefs and memories and dialogues, inner conversations. It can really take you somewhere that's almost psychedelic. So it's all about anchoring into presence and really turning up the dial on curiosity, because so often we get stuck at that superficial layer of my shoulder hurts. End of story. When in that shoulder hurting is a whole journey waiting to be unpacked.
It's got me thinking about something you said about this. We could call it a paradox of safety, because sometimes feeling the body's truth, it feels unsafe to someone, but ignoring it, it's ultimately going to be less safe in the end. So then I'm wondering if the yoga nidra, the body awareness, the body scan type meditations, is this usually what you would suggest for people to build capacity to feel when the body's messages are well, just as a general starting point, like a simple way to start feeling their way as a body as a compass without pushing into the territory of feeling too overwhelmed. But then I'm also wondering about building the capacity to feel when the body's messages are really intense or
Mm.
really
Yes.
painful.
It's all the body scan. The training ground is the body scan. The being
Mhm.
in it is the body scan. So it's like, I personally don't believe we have out of body experiences because we are in our body receiving neurological information to experience what appear to be those very extraterrestrial journeys.
Mm.
And the more anchored you are in your body, the safer you are because the less likely. So the more I anchor into my center and my being now, the less likely I am to hook onto any of Kai's stories, Kai's beliefs, Kai's emotions, Kai's stuff, right? And when we go into these journeys, we become porous. There's a vulnerability there. We can take on evil, corrupt, damaging ideas because it comes in through our porous being. We open up to
Mm.
it.
Mhm.
So we need to be anchored in our body with our attention. So it's where you choose to place your attention that anchors you, that allows you to be grounded, settled, and located in those bigger journeys. So I think of it as a tether. So while I can travel very far out in my consciousness and really, really explore those edges where very few go, I'm so anchored in myself in 2025 in this female body. I know I'm here. I'm not losing myself. I have the tether. And it's that skill set that makes it very, very, very grounded, earthed, and safe. And
Mm.
you start simply by body scanning. And that skill set and relationship and trust simply builds with time.
Huh.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think the more porous and more vulnerable we become is a product of the self trust, right? Until we
Mhm.
have that trust, we close off and we're like, oh, I'm not going there. I firmly believe that your body will suppress what you're not ready to feel. And so as you go through the body scanning process, which I recommend sort of like 5, 10, 15 minutes a day, you're just slowly building it up.
Mhm.
Um, as you build that relationship and curiosity, it's really a self friendship. The vulnerability opens up and some of the tenders fears surface and our desires surface. And
Mhm.
then we're actually in a position to be in relationship with our fears, to support the fears, to
Mhm.
hold the fears with love that's just a little bit stronger than the fear. So the love's always the loving attention, the loving um, energy, if you want to call it that, the vibration is always stronger than the fear.
Mhm.
And we wig out and freak out and catastrophize and panic and externally look for supports when the fear is stronger than the love. So that's what we're really learning to do through the body scan is to have a stronger level of love anchored in our actual somatic body that will always be able to meet the next fear. And so we
Mm.
get these thresholds in these chapters, these initiations where it's like, oh my God, a big fear is coming. Maybe it's a career leap. Maybe it's a relationship breakdown, like these big things in life. Maybe it's illness. But the fear
Mhm.
comes, and it's like, oh my God, I can't do it. I can't do it. And then you slowly learn to build that love up to be like, you'll be okay. I'm here for you. You
Mhm.
can crash,
Mhm.
you can burn. I'm going to be here for you. And the love rises up. And that's the apprenticeship of every time we have a big catastrophic event or awakening, the
Uh-huh.
fear rises and your internal capacity for love rises to meet that fear. And that to me is the definition of love. Love is not the easy, gentle, summery days with beautiful 2-foot waves. Love is meeting pure hatred, rejection,
Mm.
Mhm.
divisiveness, corruption, evil,
Mhm.
and actually rising above it to say, you can't control me or manipulate me. I'm here for you because you're actually the vulnerable one, fear.
Uh-huh.
And love over here, I'm the wise grandma. Come and let me give you a cuddle. So we're meeting the evil, the corruption, and the fear in that beautiful softness that says yes and welcome. Tell
Mm.
me all about
Mm.
it.
Mhm.
Starts with body scanning and ends with
Mhm.
body scanning.
Mm. Yeah, we're touching upon the territory of shadow,
Yeah.
disintegration, shadows as teacher, the mirroring, the mirror principle. We'll talk about that in a moment, but I wanted to ask you, for our audience who might want to begin deepening into the body scan awareness or the meditations, or
Mm.
to deepen into it, do you have resources that you offer your people?
Yeah.
Do you
So
have
for those,
meditations?
seekingbalance.com.au, you'll be able to learn about who I am and what I offer. And I have a free community and free resources, as well as paid communities. Um, and we meet in the paid communities, we meet 2 or 3 times a month, and we have circles where we meet deeply our sensuality and pleasure and our grief and our pain
Mm.
together,
Mhm.
witnessed
Mhm.
in circle.
Mhm.
So it's really beautiful.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, well, I'm sure most of our people, our audience, are going to be familiar with the shadow and shadow work. The
Mm.
shadow contains teachings and wisdom, and experiencing shadow can lead to this disintegration process that you were kind of alluding to.
Mm.
And then the question might arise, how can the disintegration be seen as a positive process? Because
Ah,
so many people will not experience that. They'll experience it as the pain and the fear that you were speaking to, rather than
yeah.
the rebuilding, the greater individuation, the deeper authenticity and sense of connection to one's inner voice.
Yeah.
And then, when disintegration occurs, yeah, part of our constructed identity is falling away.
Yeah.
Another question here would be, I'll ask it specifically, how might you help others, help your people differentiate between a healthy disintegration and then perhaps a collapse into the unhealthy chaos or the nihilism or something like that? And I suspect it has something to do with giving into the fear and giving into the darkness and allowing that to consume you. But I'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, if I was to pop it into English, the difference between a positive disintegration, which is a disintegration that takes you to your next evolution of consciousness. So you're
Mhm.
really going through a quote unquote spiritual upgrade. It's like a little test.
Uh-huh.
And the universe is saying, "You think you're ready for this? Are you going to make it through? Or are you going to, bomb out and just medicate yourself and numb out?" So a
Mhm,
positive disintegration is when there is that I can attitude.
mhm,
It's hard, it's really hard, and it might go on for months. But at some level, there is a soulful pull that says, "I can get through this. I know it's hard right now, but I'm gonna keep inquiring."
mhm,
So there's a lot of journaling, there's a lot of meditating, there's a lot of going out in nature or, shamanic journeys or
mhm,
whatever. Like, there's that I can attitude is not drowned out by the "I can't." It's not to say, and there will be some "I can'ts," of course, because that is the test.
mhm,
We're meeting the "I can't" belief system with "I think I can.
mhm,
I think I can." And then eventually we get through it where we say, "Oh, I know I can," and we've graduated.
mhm,
And I would say the, disintegrative experiences that lead to, uh, leaning exclusively on external supports and an absence of "I can,"
Mhm.
that they're the ones that can lead to huge, pathologies or pathologization,
mhm,
instead of honoring the human journey as one that, life is hard. And life is unfair, and no one gets a free ticket or entitlement of health, you know?
Mm.
I think when people fall into this, "Oh, I've been diagnosed and I'm like this," and they get very stuck in the labels and the identity, and they're not penetrating to the inside experience to find the gift and the wisdom,
mhm,
they're really drowning in the "I can'ts"
Uh-huh.
and "I am this XYZ pathology." I
Uh-huh.
believe that's when it becomes stagnant. There's not much growth.
mhm,
Did that answer
mhm.
that question?
Yeah, I think so. And I
Yeah.
like how you spoke to how the saying or the statement of "I can't," sometimes that is there because there can be a wisdom in recognizing that too. And I would put a dot, 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 yet on the end of it. I can't do that yet. It's knowing one's capacity to be able to meet potential states, but knowing that one can get there through whatever it is, dedication,
This
commitment,
is
persistence, a devotion.
Yeah, and this is where I am sometimes considered radically hardcore, because in my opinion, if you can stay in that moment and breathe, you can.
Hmm.
It's not like that "I can't" voice is not your voice, and this is the sense and ground process is becoming exquisitely clear on the boundary between what is yours and what is not yours. And I can almost guarantee you that I can't voice doesn't belong. It's from the external world. And we live in a capitalist society that wants you to believe you can't, so you buy more stuff. It's a very loud, invasive belief system. But while you are breathing, you access your life force. You can, because remember, everything is an experience. Life is a string of experiences. So in that moment, with that I can't voice, if you can witness it, breathe through it, you can. You're still alive, aware, and connected. So I think people also jump ahead into, oh my God, can I do that business? Can I do that relationship? Can I heal this? They're jumping ahead into the future, but where we are is right now. Can I move through this experience here now? Well, if you're breathing, you can. So it's really, really distilling it down into that micro moment, which is actually eternal presence. And it is that field beyond right and wrong. When you enter the power of presence and eternity and breathe, you can do it, you are doing it, and you've arrived. There is nothing to learn and there's nowhere to go. There's nowhere else to be. And so it's about really distilling it down into penetrating into that sensation, attention and sensation. And can I geek out with you a little bit?
Yeah, let's geek out. I thought we were already geeking out, but let's go deeper.
Oh, I'm just getting started. But as you know, the energetics of things of the physical form is the last expression. Things start with whispers and hints and ideas, and we're clutching at murkiness. There's no form. It's like a dream state. And then, suddenly I'll be like, oh, okay, it's a chocolate cake. All right, I've got this idea. It's clear to me. It's a chocolate cake. Then it's like, okay, well, I need to think about the ingredients. And I'm thinking. There's still no form yet. And eventually it becomes, okay, I'll go to the shop and I'll buy the ingredients. And we're starting to get some physical form. And then we've got to mix the ingredients and turn the oven on and bake the cake. And eventually, after all of this invisible process turning into visible makings, at the end of it, you'll get a chocolate cake. All of life follows that process from the invisible and formless into the visible and formed. And we actively participate in that process. So when we have these hints and whispers of what was to become the chocolate cake, they're actually neurons firing in our body. That's just in the beginning, it's like, what is it? I'm just feeling something. We don't even know what it is yet. It's just there's something in our body that says I'm feeling something. And eventually that clarity lands, chocolate cake. And when I say I'm geeking out is the very first physical form where things transform from the invisible formless to form. The very first hint of that is that first neuron that fires in your body. It's gone from the collective ether and it's landed in your body as a physical firing. When we can connect to the physical sensation, the body sensation through our 8 senses, we are tapped into that moment where formless has its first hint of form. And that comes through as those inner visions, inner conversations, the orientation and location. We dance it, we feel it, we start to connect with the whispers of the cosmos. And that's what this body scanning process gives us, that we don't have to wait further down the line to get the clues and hints, right? Because we can see it in the physical form. We get those hints and whispers way up where they begin, in that original landing point of capturing the cosmos through the body.
Yeah, this can be a particularly potent space to be in, this space in between the times where we're no longer who we are and we feel as though we're in some kind of waiting room, like not quite who it is that we're becoming yet. The cocoon state. Once a caterpillar, not yet a butterfly. It's liminal, it's timeless, and it's a necessary interlude from one stage to the other. And in those spaces, if we are attuned to it, that's when this connection with the unseen realms can become particularly powerful. I'm curious about this space in between.
Yeah.
What's your journey been like navigating this space that I just spoke to?
Well, again, I think for me, so I've had a really interesting life apprenticeship. I call it the apprenticeship of aloneness
Mhm,
because I'm one of those people, and actually I've never met anyone else like me, but I'm sure there's others out there, where throughout my life I've reached out for external guidance, teachers, mentors, therapists, whatever,
mhm,
but they have not been nourishing for me. So the major lesson the universe is getting me is go within. This is
mhm,
where your teacher is. So from a very, very, very young age, I was kind of forced to go inward and collect this information, this warm data, and
mhm,
access my intuition.
mhm,
And so my relationship with it is it's the only way. And I'll keep experimenting from time to time in reaching out or
Um,
connecting where I can with external allies and
mhm,
reading books. And I'm a voracious learner.
mhm,
Um, but it's this consistent message for me from since quite a young age that this is where the information and wisdom lies. It's in my inner realm. It's in that liminal space. So when I
mhm,
have a question or a growth point, um, an unknown, a mystery, my tendency is to collect a range of information from the outer world,
uh-huh,
be aware when that maxes out and has its limits, and reference the inner to
uh-huh,
integrate both that cold data and warm data combined.
uh-huh,
I've got a memory coming back to me from when I was in my late 20s, and I was just I had really peaked on seeking external guidance.
right,
Um, and I did experience scary tinnitus and vestibular migraine and BPPV, which is positional vertigo. And that's what really triggered my interest in those arenas because a lot of the
mm,
advices live with it. Nothing can be done. But I had neuroscience background. I had already had over a decade of yoga practice, and I
mhm,
was like, there's got to be more. And I saw spiritual healers and kinesiologists, and I was almost, I would say, the closest I've ever been to a time of depression. There was just that feeling of
mm,
hopelessness.
mhm,
And anyway, I'm quite intuitive, and um, I don't personally don't have too much force or push in me. So I'm not one to push myself to do things. I flow with what effortlessly unfolds. That's my nature.
mhm,
And so I found myself having a faux funeral. That was just what unfolded. And I lay down on
mm,
the floorboards of my share house
mhm,
room at the time. I said goodbye to the sun, the moon, the stars, the trees, family members, friends, and I let myself die. And my
mhm,
nervous system completely slowed down, really, really into this very, very, very liminal space. And I just stayed there
mm,
and I enjoyed saying goodbye to it all.
mhm,
And I allowed whatever needed to die, die. And I think I spent a good 20 minutes in that death state, that deep shavasana.
mhm.
And eventually, something sparked, and I thought, well, I've had enough of dying now. I think I think I'm ready to get back out there. And I
Mhm,
really slowly had to find the energy to sit up, and I
mm,
slowly sat up.
mhm,
My nervous system had to wake up a bit, and I slowly got myself up, and I put on my bathers, and I went to the local swimming pool in Northcote or whatever,
mm,
and I just sunbaked. And
mm,
it was my rebirth. I'd
yeah,
intuitively taken myself into a death process.
yeah, death ceremony.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
then I'd intuitively allowed myself to earth by laying on the
mm,
grass and sunbaking,
mm,
receiving the solar, receiving the earth. And from that moment, I stopped looking outside for guidance. I
mhm,
left the hospital, I left the
mhm,
university as a vestibular audiologist, built my own methodologies, went into a radical creative cocoon where I built all my online programs. This is in 2014.
mhm,
Built all my online programs, did some really deep inner work, and I rebirthed myself into the world with this lens of honoring
mm,
that liminal space because it's so powerful.
mm. Yeah, I was curious about that. If you had gone through the vestibular symptoms yourself,
Mm,
and that's how you
mm,
found your way into that little niche, because it does seem like to be quite a niche group of people that you're offering your gifts to in that little space. Anyway, I know it's not just that; it's so much more expansive,
mm,
and that there is a resonance there, as you spoke about feeling like you reached some sort of threshold, to use my own language, of seeking teachers in the external
mm.
and really coming back into your own inner authority in a deep way. That's been a big part of my path, because not being born into any kind of spiritual or medicine lineage or heritage, or not having those ways of living, those cosmologies passed on to me directly through family or
Mm,
through close community. As I continued to mature into this path, I really felt a deep grief and a longing and a yearning for that,
Mm.
which, like many people on the spiritual path who feel that there is some kind of void of that within their lives, they do. They do go out seeking and searching other traditions to
yeah.
feel what fits. And sometimes a lot of people do find something that feels like a soul calling. And I certainly have had that. But after exploring and spending time with various teachers
Mm,
and lineages and traditions, I have come to a time where it's like, I'm what feels true and right for me is what's deep inside myself. I
yeah.
really feel like there is a true knowing that there's no external gurus or teachers that can really offer me something that is truly not within myself, that I can't cultivate or already know. It's a real devotion, not just a devotion, although that is a word that's certainly applicable, but oh, it's right on the tip of my tongue. But let's just call it, my own relationship with spirit moving through me, with soul, that has
It's a cla-
become
it's a clarity.
it is a clarity, yeah. And I'm thinking about the mirror principle. Like, there is some kind of convergence here that I want to touch on in regards to the shadows, but then also the mirroring. It's
Mm,
often said, like in the self-development, or we could call it the spiritual world, that everyone is a mirror for something inside you.
yep.
And yeah, sometimes people are mirroring back that you don't need to rely on these external authorities to come and find your own truth.
Yep.
And I know that forms part of this path of stepping into and showing up in your own authentic leadership.
Yep.
And this is something I wanted to talk to you about. There's a few threads here that I'd love to explore, but maybe two questions. What does this mean to you? Like, what does it look like for you to show up in that space of authentic leadership? But then also, how have you experienced being a mirror for others?
Yeah, it's a big one. I wanted to also circle back and say absolutely humans yearn for connection and
Hmm.
belonging. And I
Yep.
think there is that toxic groove in society, the way it's sort of formed over the last few thousand years, where they become almost cults, where to belong means to subscribe to certain belief systems. And
Hmm.
that's where we can be giving some of our soul away for the cost is belonging. You know, do we want to be a lone wolf and really have our own sovereignty and our own sense of truth and clarity, which each human does have? You have your own unique experience. Um, and so honoring this diversity and having true belonging is a bit of an edge.
Mm.
And a lot of people, and this will feed into the mirror question, a lot of people are so afraid of opinions. And when
Hmm.
you have truly individuated, soulful people, let's say you've got 5 at a table, you have 5 different opinions.
Hmm.
They all independently share their unique observation and felt experience. And my experience, um, as a clear thinking and clear speaking woman, is that people are deeply uncomfortable with opinions. Um, and it's kind of staggering to me because for me, it's a flow state. I take life in, and then there's a creative output. I personally again, it's one of those things I was born with, so I got a little bit of a free ride. I was born with this. In shamanic womancraft, we talk about our birth story. My mum had 1 hour labor, 12-minute active labor. I literally was just born into the world
Mm.
with no medication, no intervention. It was a quick, rapid birth. And so my creative process is input, output. There's no blockage or resistance to my creativity. And actually sharing a real human opinion is a creative process, and it's an offering to the world. It's a gift.
Mhm.
Because so much of what we do in groupthink and in masking and in modern day culture is we repeat scripts. It's not the raw deal. It's not real. It's not vulnerable. It's not so creative, but there's safety in that. So my mirroring, so that it comes back to the yearning for belonging and connection and peers, where it's like, I don't want you to be my guru, but yet let's share experience and witness each other side by side as equals, which is really sitting in circle.
Mhm.
And bringing that culture back to life where I can be my unique, differentiated, individuated adult self. I'm responsible for me and I can share myself. And that someone can have the maturity to witness, receive, and then share themselves. And so what we're talking about here is not merging, not tending, bending, and fawning, moving beyond masks, and moving beyond this teacher-student relationship, which is so kind of, toxically ingrained. In both forms, right? I don't wanna be pedestaled as a guru, and I don't want someone to force me to treat them as a guru, right? So how can we meet equal power, equal value, equal importance, and actually have different opinions?
Yeah. Yeah. I know you've had some interesting experiences showing up in this way regarding the shadows and the friction, particularly when it comes to other people in leadership positions or being in programs or spaces that others are facilitating. And it
Yeah,
might be valuable to hear you speak more into this a little bit, the friction, the shadows,
yeah,
the reflections, what you have observed more in others meeting you in this space of you
yeah,
standing in this
yep,
place of authenticity and truth and power, and then what you've learned about yourself through being in these situations.
yeah. Where to start? But, the common thread, I think, is I've learnt that I'm a clear seer. So I
Mhm.
meet reality and process reality, quite rapidly because I'm in my body, right? So
Mm.
I've got this incredible asset.
Mhm.
And what I notice when I've participated in some group events or workshops, I turn up in all of my power and with this mentality of equal power. So I don't turn up into a hierarchical situation, and I also don't view people through the lens of roles or identities, right? Which is, um, I treat each person equally
Mhm.
and with equal reverence. And so, what can happen if there is a leader, which is really common, especially with younger leaders,
Mhm.
their ego can be threatened if they feel that they're not top dog
Mhm.
and that their word is not the final word. And
Mhm.
um, so what I notice and what I'm sensitive to is that ego position
Mhm.
of, wanting me to behave in a certain way, but
Mhm.
my body won't be told, right? I am who I am,
Mhm.
and I'm likely to stare them in the eyes and hold my ground and be present with the conversation from that place of equal power,
Mhm.
and that I've noticed can be quite triggering and confronting. And maybe you can speak to
Yeah.
that a
Well,
little
as
bit.
you spoke to before, that's the fear that can be felt through receiving others' opinions,
Mm,
because it seems to be some kind of default of the human condition to varying degrees that we wrap our sense of identity and worth and esteem up in the things that we have to say or
mm,
share or the statements that the language that we use.
Yeah. And again, it's I'm still getting my head around this. Like, I have got a huge learning curve when it comes to fear of the body, because it's not my somatic journey, right? So I'm in some ways kind of cognitively learning. But when I do bring up a lot of the way there's a lot of the feedback I get, which is often a compliment.
Mhm.
And if you see my TEDx talk, the biggest feedback I got was people said, "You dance while you talk. You speak so much from your body."
Mhm.
And it's a similar thing in these mirroring situations, that I'm often using body language, speaking from the body, speaking from my center. And it's
Mhm.
quite penetrating, because I'm not coming from the cognitive or intellectual landscape where most people reside. And I think somebody else said, um, I think you speak as though you're superior. And I thought, that's interesting. And there's some projection right there. Because
Uh-huh.
in me, I know I view everyone as equal, and I see
Mhm.
people's power, and I see their potency, and I'm delighted when it bubbles to the surface and comes out. But um, that observation of superiority, I think, is more because I'm speaking from somatic experience, felt sense.
Mhm.
I'm speaking from my body. There is a weight, there's a gravity that comes with that. It's a
Mm.
clarity, that I'm certain in my experience. I'm certain from where I stand. I'm
Okay.
located. And I think that can be um, quite destabilizing for people who haven't yet located themselves. They don't
Mhm.
know
Yeah,
what their
confronting.
opinions are.
Mhm.
They're not sure. They're
Mhm.
swimming in the sea of noise. Like,
Mhm.
they're listening to podcasts, reading books, and looking out there. They're grappling for ideas, and they're just not sure where they are, who they are, or what they've got to contribute.
Mhm.
And so that is, I guess you could say, the trigger and the shadow work.
Mhm.
And ultimately, I believe a lot of it comes back to that fear of dropping in, slowing down, and pausing to be with one's own somatic cathedral, the
Yeah, I
inner
love that
world.
phrase that you use. That's so good. Yeah.
And all of those insecurities come to the surface,
Mhm.
um, which, to be quite honest, we can speak about this. It's really unpleasant to be triggering people's insecurities and shadow work. At one level, it's beautiful and it's spiritual, and I'm privileged or honored to be part of shadow work. I've got a lot of respect for shadow work, and I personally enjoy it.
Mhm.
But the human side of it is, I just want to have fun with people. I just want to share ideas. I just want to throw opinions around the room and, be like a puppy dog. But when I'm faced with someone's insecurities, it's just, it's not
Mhm.
ideal.
Mhm.
So there's that too, which is part of it. It's part of the spiritual journey. I need to be able to know what's mine,
Mhm.
know what's theirs, and give them a lot of space to meet their insecurities in their own time. I never provoke, push. I don't interfere with it. It's almost like an unspoken space
Mm.
that I allow to unfold in
Mhm.
its own journey.
Mhm. Yeah, I know it from both sides. Being a very, very sensitive child and then feeling unseen, misunderstood, unacknowledged. I've shared about my journey
Mm.
on various podcast episodes before, and I think we've touched upon it to some degree in past conversations, perhaps, I can't recall.
Right.
But through going through the adolescence journey, I had a lot of that cast away,
Mm.
suppressed, repressed. And through that, I wasn't connected. N- I no longer became connected to what was happening in my body,
Yeah.
to my voice as an instrument of healing and power, connection, truth, authenticity. And it's been a really, really long journey for me to reclaim that. And I
Yeah.
know through the reclamation of my connection to my body, to my voice, that's similar to what you're speaking about. I've had several people over the years express to me how triggering I can be to other people.
Mm.
It's an interesting thing.
Yeah. And I mean, the other deep ancestral work for me, if we sort of open up another thread, because it's all it's all part
Mhm.
of the great whole.
Yeah.
But I was aware that because I consider myself a kind, compassionate, insightful person. Not perfect. I'm flawed. I'm wild. I'm human,
Yeah, we're all fallible.
but I'm kind, and I want what's best for people. I love seeing people shine and contact their soul,
Mhm.
be real.
Mhm.
Lights me up. And interestingly, one of my big inner core beliefs, which was a real doozy,
Mm.
and I'm sure it's through that ancestral lineage, was I'm a monster. Like I am just
Really?
fundamentally bad.
Hmm.
And part of that came from my ignorance of my power, my ignorance of my presence, and my ignorance of this shadow mirror thing. So it's like this unspoken vibe, because I'm highly sensitive also, of noticing how people would avoid me or distance from me. And I'm like, ooh, what have I done? And it's energetic.
Mhm.
And then having to peel back those layers. And actually, it wasn't, I didn't notice it much in high school.
Mhm.
I was very free and sovereign in high school and dipped in and out anywhere. I felt belonging everywhere. But the older I became, the more creative I became, the more successful I became, the more financially independent I became, the more I really became that walking trigger.
Mhm.
And so there was that story of like, am I bad? Am I wrong? Am I a monster? Because my body was reading how other people perceived me.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until I clicked onto projections and shadows
Mhm.
that everything started to make sense, and I could penetrate into that ancestral story of, being an intuitive woman is being a witch, or being sensitive is being too much, all of these sort of rejecting my nature.
Mhm.
And being an opinionated woman, whoa, that's just death on a
Mhm.
stick.
Mhm.
Whereas my body compass, I'm quite sensitive, I believe, with how I use my voice, and I do a lot of holding back and witnessing and not speaking. But when I do speak up, it's like my body is really thrusting it forward. So it would take
Um,
significant energy for me to clamp it down and not share it.
Mhm.
So again, it's that body compass of my soul calling, saying, no, you need to speak up in this room. Your voice is needed right here. And not speaking would cause me pain.
mm.
Um,
Mhm.
so anyway, a lot of those monster stories were to do with being an intelligent, opinionated, intuitive, sensitive woman, and
Mhm.
what that has meant over the generations.
Mhm.
And so it was interesting. And of course, none of my friends perceived me as a monster or any of that. But it was in me. It was a very, very deep cellular belief. And to access my own goodness took quite a while.
Mm.
And actually, it took until I met a new friend who had a profound ability herself to see, clear seeing, to cut through the bullshit, to name it.
Mhm.
And she gifted me these words. She said, Joey, your presence is so staggering. It's quite penetrating,
Mhm.
that it's very exposing to be in your presence. And so many people would not be ready for that.
Mhm.
And I thought, whoa, I was super ignorant to all of this because
Mhm.
I am who I am, right? And
Mhm.
the other thing for our listeners to contemplate is you don't know what a room is like when you're not in it. You only know a room with your presence in it, right? Your vibration is altering every space you're in.
Mhm.
So I don't know what a room is like without Joey in it. And so it was interesting getting her perspective.
Wow, that's great.
yeah, and then reorganizing how I perceived everything, and my journey and my healing was to actually touch my own inner goodness and believe it.
Mhm. Mm.
That's been powerful and probably,
Mhm.
continues process ongoing.
Mm. Yeah, what a beautiful reflection for your friend to offer you. And that's why I said the word confronting before, because I know that within myself before I had reclaimed a lot of my own power and connection to deeper self, that I would feel that sense of confrontation through people like who I am now, through people like yourself, because I would feel like that clear seeing just penetrated all the way through me.
Yep.
So when we don't have that sense of connection to ourselves, yeah, there's going to be some kind of nervous system response, as you spoke to before. And for me, I knew that that was either going to be fight, and particularly more so the flight response.
Yep.
I wanted to get out of their presence.
Yeah. And the shadow work for me, so what I needed to learn in that is I I was completely self-blind. I had been trained because of tall poppy syndrome. I'd been trained
Mhm,
my whole life to just view myself as very ordinary, not different to anybody else. So that was my genuine self-image.
mhm,
And so I would expect and assume, okay, they're two key words, people. Expectations and assumptions are generally not good news. But
mhm,
I would expect and assume other people had the same level of presence and self awareness that I had because I was just um, thinking that that was just part of the common human experience.
Mhm.
Doesn't everybody do faux funerals and right?
uh-huh,
There was a genuine level of ignorance. And so because of those, subconscious expectations and assumptions,
Mm.
my energy is essentially saying to the next person, "Rise up and meet me."
Mhm.
And they're saying, "No, I can't. I'm not ready. I don't know how."
Yeah. Mhm.
Right? So I've also had to energetically do work at my end,
mhm.
um, to allow my energy to be receptive and
For
curious to meet them
rem
where they are because I have no idea where they are. There is no
right.
expectation and there is no assumption. Show me when you're ready.
Hmm.
And that this is really subtle work, but it makes a big difference. So
Mhm.
there's shadow work for all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, the phrase that you used earlier, the somatic cathedral, I love
Mm,
that because it invites a sense of reverence, a deep
mm,
importance of connecting back to
mm.
this inner temple. And
Yeah,
while we've still got a little bit of time, I'd love to pivot and speak about the inward journey and extreme experiences a little
yeah,
bit.
yeah,
So you mentioned all of your work with people that have tinnitus and other, let's just say, quote unquote, unexplainable bodily sensations. This
yeah,
could certainly be seen as touching upon the world of extreme experiences, particularly if they're severely disorienting, uncomfortable, painful, any kind of sensory overwhelm. And
yeah,
then perhaps, from another perspective, which is not too dissimilar, extreme experiences, particularly in my world, might be seen in the severe alteration of consciousness through psychedelics or through visionary medicines, peak experiences, and that broad spectrum of experience that's available within those states. So, what's your common reference point here for what constitutes an extreme experience? And how might you help others make sense of this?
yeah. Stay with me. I hope this lands, but I'm going to answer this by saying I've got a neuroscience background and I'm a sensory specialist. So I understand how when we stimulate sound in the ears, it
Mm,
triggers neural bundles to fire in synchrony. And the amplitude of that response dictates the arousal level of that response.
mm,
That sensory signal goes through the limbic centers and emotional centers and creates either a safety signal or a
Mhm.
danger signal. And from there, it travels into the interpretation centers of the brain where you get stories, metaphors, the mythic poetic going on.
mhm,
And in that space, we get the imagery, we get the visions, we get the insights, we get the voices, we get the full journey. when people are stuck in pain or just stuck in general, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, numbing, medicating, etc., they're not going on the full journey. They're stuck in the pain. The pain is where the signal ends and the experience ends. And we end up talking about the body and at the body, not from the body. Right? So to start with, the journey is usually a place of pain and stuckness, quote unquote, symptoms. Yep. A lot of the I can'ts and a lot of confusion. Discomfort, pain, confusion. It's messy and it's scattered. So I support people to anchor, to understand the concept of loving attention, which is dramatically different to judgmental attention. Judgmental attention says, I'm noticing this and I don't want it. Or I'm noticing this and it's great, more please, crave, yes, more, right? Craving and avoidance. That's your judgmental attention. But loving attention says, no matter what you are, come into my arms, tell me more. I'm here. I'm bigger than you. So the big experiences are when there's more neurons firing in synchrony. And when we really surrender and open up into the bodily sensations, body sensations hold stories and emotions, they're all interconnected. The more we open up into more of those 8 senses, the more we get whole body flow, we get more neural synchrony moving and shifting and evolving. So think about a river flowing instead of a river that's dammed. And as you get more neural synchrony at heightened states, so for argument's sake, instead of 10 neurons communicating, you get 1,000 neurons communicating. So you get a larger signal throughout your 8 senses. That's when you start going, whoa, I'm tripping out. I'm seeing patterns. I'm hearing this. It's deep. It's 3D. It's multidimensional. You get spirit guides coming in to talk to you, and the lines are open, right? So the more we relax and surrender, you're getting the parasympathetic nervous system turning up. You're getting more relaxation responses, complementing the high sympathetic arousal responses. So you've got more neurons firing. You've got this capacity for both increased parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. And there's this staying present with the body itself, with the raw sensation. So I see it as like an embodied journey that starts with the raw sensation and the signal actually grows, incorporates the whole body, all 8 senses, and then you get that full kind of mythic, poetic journey. But at any point in that journey, we can cut it off with our fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and disconnect. And so instead of getting these rivers free flowing and releasing and resolving and metabolizing and integrating, we get pain points, we get symptoms, because the energy has to do something. So, it expresses through the pain or through the vertigo or through the migraine or through the tinnitus. So big experiences for me have that quality to them.
Yeah, and there's something to be said about this developing sensitivity too. And I'm circling all the way back, but you use the word, which is the pathologization of these types of experiences. And, regarding this sensitivity, there's often this sensitivity that's present in people who experience sensory overwhelm, but then also in the peak experiences, such as visionary medicines, they can lead to this increased sensitivity in all manner of bodily sensations and energetic perception in general. And it can be so easy for people to pathologize sensitivities or to wish them away. But really, it's here that we're recontextualizing or appropriately contextualizing this sensitivity, not as a problem that needs to be solved, but as somatic wisdom
It's a
available
portal.
to us.
It's a portal. I would go so far as to say, and I'm quite sure I mentioned this in my book, which is not coming out till March 2026, but Sensing
Okay.
Ground, is when what I feel and experience makes sense to me, I experience inner peace. It is that simple. When we experience inner conflict, it's because at some level, what we sense and feel doesn't yet make sense. This is different to meaning making, which is more cognitive. Sense making. And so as we go on, so I consciously take myself on these journeys, these inner journeys. If I want to connect to my ancestors, or if I have questions, or if there's a little bit of confusion wafting around my field, I will take myself on a journey, a sense-making journey, by going in through the portal of my body. And it's having the patience and the presence to complete and integrate the sense-making. And I call this biocompletion. And that's where you have this upsetting experience. It's like, well, what was that? You know, I'm seeing things, I'm hearing things. There's pain, there's pulsing, there's fuzzy feelings, right? If we don't complete that process, we're sort of just left with sensory conflict. It's an inner mismatch. It's just like, oh, I better go to work, whatever. But if we learn to stay present and feel through the fullness of it, what biocompletion means is you get the signals start to grow, they peak, and then they wane. It's just like the moon cycle. And then you come back to a baseline level of calm, grounded clarity. So if we abandon the experience midway or a quarter of the way in or 3/4 of the way, we haven't actually completed, and the body will keep wanting to complete it.
Yep.
And that's where it's like you get that pattern again in life, again in life. It's like, when are we going to just bio-complete the experience so the pattern can rest? And generally what that feels like is full body expansion, full body vitality, invigorating, aliveness, relief, clarity. So really coming through this biocompletion process means that you have probably finalized one of your fight, flight, or freeze, fawn processes. And it's a really nice feeling. It's very empowering.
Yeah, that's great. Bodily sensations as invitations into mystery rather than problems to fix. We're reframing things like anxiety, vertigo, tinnitus, sensory overwhelm as gateways into deeper bodily wisdom, trusting the darkness and the discomfort as thresholds into expanded awareness. Your body as a
Yeah.
somatic cathedral.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I think for high sensitive people, of which it could be as many as 20%, so 1 in 5 people, men and women, these are people who have high neurological intensity. So when they're sitting to look at a sunset, their body is pinging with stimulation versus other people that go, nice sunset, right? So these people need less medications. They need less stimulation to get the same neurological output. And high sensitive people are very good with detail because they're noticing such fine differences in the vibrational scale, right? They're very tuned in. And so my sense is that high sensitive people probably don't need as many psychedelic journeys, for example, because for a woman, it could be your menstrual cycle or your understanding of your orgasmic cycles is enough to take you on those journeys where you don't need the external supports or medicines, because actually life itself is offering you those inner journeys if we say yes and we fully feel them. So it's also reframing this idea of what a shamanic journey is and what a psychedelic journey is and what an inner vision quest is. That I think the more sensitive we become, the more we can really access this wisdom any day of the week and anywhere we are. Because we're living in the somatic cathedral. It's not a place we go, it's who we are.
I love that. It's not a place we go, it's who we are. I think that's a good place to tie a bow on it, Joey.
Thanks, Kai. Rich
This is
conversation.
great. Anything that we haven't touched upon that you might want to say before we finish up?
Well, if
We've
anyone
covered a
wants,
lot of ground.
if anyone wants to learn more about me, visit seekingbalance.com.au. And, add a comment to my TEDx talk if you feel like tuning into that. Invisible forces that shape us, and the body is our compass. And my community is very welcoming, and it's a great place to explore these portals.
And you got your book as well, Rock Steady, Healing
Yep.
Vertigo, or
So Rock
Tinnitus with
Steady.
Neuroplasticity.
Yep. Rock Steady is my first book. That's Healing Vertigo or Tinnitus with Neuroplasticity. And it's actually relevant to any body sensation. But I use vertigo and tinnitus as case studies because that's my world. And then my new book, Sensing Ground, will be out March 2026.
That's great. Okay, you mentioned the TEDx. You've got your YouTube channel as well. You've also got the online program.
Yeah. So my online program is both Rock Steady or Sensing Ground.
Okay, great. All right. Final words, invitation, encouragement. What do you want to offer the people that have been tuning into our conversation as we say goodbye?
Without a doubt, I would love everyone listening to truly believe me when I say your body is on your side. It's calling you home. And no matter how painful it feels, there is nothing to be afraid of. And it's really holding that fear with as much love as you can muster up. That's the apprenticeship, because that your body is actually teaching you and inviting you to build that skillfulness of directing love towards yourself. And I really would love to see a global epidemic of people learning how to direct loving attention toward themselves. It's what we need. It's what we need in a world full of fear, is this self-generated love cycle. And I mean that through the neurochemicals of oxytocin, serotonin, opioids, endorphins. We are generating the biochemistry of love by using our attention meaningfully. And that is the skill set that I teach. And I really want everyone listening to know that it's possible. Anyone can do it.
Boom. That's a wrap. Thanks again, Joey. This has been great.